1 in 5 Americans suffer from chronic pain. Many are now using CBD for relief.
Activists are hoping pot could be legalized nationwide by the end of 2019.
When you look at premium cannabis, the Illinois House approved legalizing recreational marijuana.
Welcome to The Budding Report, a weekly show centered around all things cannabis. Please join us in welcoming our host, Charles Horton, and his co-host, Melissa Nassitz, as they share the latest in cannabis news, conduct interviews with top leaders in the cannabis space, and promote some of the latest in science and innovation. And now to our host, Charles Horton.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Budding Report. It's been a wet day or a couple of days here in Marshall, Texas. I wasn't able to get to the studio. Hopefully I'm coming through crystal clear using the Viasat internet. Today, first of all, we have our co-hosts, both Melissa and Dr. Shaw with us. Melissa, how are you? Just got back from vacation?
I did. I got to spend a little time with my mom, which was always wonderful. And we went out to Monterey, Little Carmel by the sea. So an old walk down memory lane. We used to live out there when I was younger. So it was a wonderful trip. Good to get away. Great weather. But it's good to be back as well and back in the studio. Although I was hoping to see you. So this time next week.
I was really looking forward to lunch with you, but definitely we'll do it next week. Dr. Shaw, what's new in your world? I know you were busy out doing a audit last week.
Yeah, so I got to take a little bit of time off prior to that, and then I headed out to Indiana. I had to tour the opiate treatment programs that are up and running there, and got a taste of the Midwest weather again, which is kind of interesting. It's May and it was probably in the 40s and 50s with heavy rain and clouds, and that was a bit different from coming out of Arizona where it's sunny and 100 degrees.
Well, when I went to Arizona, it was like in the 50s, but later that week it was supposed to be reaching 100 in Tucson. So it sounds like you have some pretty wild fluctuations in weather too.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
So we have Dan Betts joining us today, who's a Delta 8 expert that we look forward to learning more about Delta 8. It's been a subject on a lot of our shows, but he's also a criminal defense attorney in Austin and a friend of Chris Perry's. So this is his first time on, and he may want to co-host with us in the future. So we'll see how that goes. And we also have Gina Dubbe and Leslie Apgar with us from the Greenhouse Wellness and Blissivia. Is that how you pronounce that?
Blisiva,
nice. I love it. So our first thing this morning is our news article. And the news article, which I got to tell you kind of irritated the heck out of me, was evaluation of state cannabis laws and rates of self-harm and assault. So the premises behind the study is that in states that have allowed recreational marijuana, that there's more incidences of self-harm and assault. And I've always found, at least for me, that marijuana is a relaxing thing and it doesn't cause any aggression. And I'm more of a couch potato, and that's my belief that everybody does on marijuana. But let's start with the doctor. What did you think of the study?
Okay, so yeah, I sent this for our group to consider, knowing that it would trigger debate. And so this was published in the Journal of American Medical Association, JAMA, recently. And let me summarize a couple key points. So they wanted to they asked the question of whether state cannabis legalization laws with varying degrees of commercialization was associated with rates of self-harm and injury. So how they accomplish this, and I say this before I kind of tear it apart. In this cohort study, they actually went through health insurance claims for about 15 years, between 2003, 2017, over 75 million claims. And they determined at best a very weak association in males under 40. So the way I would kind of summarize this before the group, gets in on it is this strikes me as a typical epidemiological study where health claim databases are mined using specific diagnostic billing codes in attempt to support a hypothesis. What's particularly amusing to me is despite 75 million health claims over 15 years, only a weak association could be demonstrated in males under 40, and that's using specific modeling adjustments. As per the authors, limitations to the studies include, and I think you'll enjoy this, we perform negative control analysis to test for unobserved confounders, but alternative explanations for our findings cannot be ruled out. Another one, not all cases of self-harm or assault are documented accurately in health insurance claims. Following up with this, coding of state laws is complex. We relied on published sources that rigorously evaluated the legal test, but misclassification cannot be ruled out. And lastly, and my favorite, some potential state and individual modifiers were not observed, such as the concomitant use of alcohol and cannabis, which may confer greater risk than the use of either substance alone. Cannabis commercialization may be most relevant to self-harm and assault when alcohol concomitant use is likely.
I thought the whole entire study was, there were so many flaws in it. Number one, the fact that it had to be such a specific target group that they were talking about, that they saw any fluctuation of variation, and that it was such a small, almost negligible percentage from with or without. It wouldn't even show up unless you were looking for it. And then third, the controls. Obviously, you're stating that their claims at the end kind of negate everything prior to that, but just how can you do this with a control? You're looking at different states, you're looking at different populations, you're looking at different, racial groups. There's so many different things here that there's no way to have a clean source of information. So it just seemed like it was a way to attack and find a push against legalization.
I think one thing that I saw from it was that, with these big observational studies, you can't tell the difference between causation and correlation. There's no way to repeat these studies. There's no way to have actual controls because you have to use these strange simulacrum of controls for these other states that we have. It's all we have. It's what we can look at and say, but a weak correlation out of that much data, it doesn't necessarily say much. It's easy for us to see patterns as humans.
I just want to add one more interesting point that I think Charles probably touched upon. From what I can recall, without looking at the figure, what made it seemed that, the states, they had the highest rates of assault and self-harm in states that had recreational marijuana programs. And I was trying to wrap my head around that. So somehow the more you legalize it, the more chance there is for self-harm and assault. Anyone want to comment on that one?
I have a theory. I think that people who have risk for depression, suicidality, and associated mental health conditions seek out marijuana as a treatment. And they seek it out in places where it's easy to find, and a lot of people don't want to get medical cards, and recreational states are where you can easily get it and self-medicate. And I think that those people are already prone to self-harm, assaults, and things like that. So that's, I think, what we're seeing.
I think the definition of what they were considering self-harm was very interesting as well, and it continued to fluctuate. I think that nomenclature is inappropriate in this sort of situation. And if you're talking about, like you said, with depression, it seems like the study should be much more aligned to that realm and the study of this as the mind and more mental illness versus self-harm. They mentioned cutting, they mentioned, suicide attempts, but I think if you're talking about increasing alcohol and marijuana as a combination, that's more aggressive behaviors, which doesn't usually lead to self-harm. It was very muddy. The entire thing was. It wasn't fun to read either.
And if you look at the amount, if you go to the supplemental data and you look at the list of ICD-9 and 10 codes for self-harm, it is a laundry list. And so how exactly they were able to somehow adjust for this other thing that we have happening called the opiate epidemic, and how there's probably a lot of unintentional overdose deaths involved with that, I'm not sure. They didn't really address that too much in the article.
I didn't get into those smaller statistics at the end. Like I said, the article was enough for me. I'll leave it to you, Dr. Shaw.
Hi, it's Dr. Apgar. I just would be very curious to see how much recreational cannabis programs saved people from self-harm or from assault, because here at our dispensary, especially during COVID, where people's mental health spiraled down dramatically and very quickly, we actually have a number of patients who have come to us full of gratitude. You saved our lives. You know, this program saved my life. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for cannabis. So it's interesting. You can spin data any which way, but obviously with a source like JAMA, I was pretty disappointed with that level of quality of a study. I thought it was very, very poor.
I don't have much hair, but what little hair I had was standing straight up as I read that article. Well, we're going to go off to a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we have Gina Dubbe and Dr. Leslie Apgar, and look forward to hearing about how their business is going and how they're helping people avoid stress and self-harm with their dispensary. It's a lot better subject and study matter in my mind. So we will be right back after this quick commercial break.
Hello. Here on my lunch run in the middle of the heat, where I get my break really quick after training clients and leading some classes. I am taking my Simply Satisfy. It is 3 sprays, organic hemp. Next one is my Simply Start. You can take it twice a day or once a day. I already took one morning dose. I'm now taking my afternoon dose. One little yummy organic hemp. Try to check them out. Simply Generous. Helicopter. All right, time to go training. Run down the hill. Bye-bye.
Well, welcome back. We now have Gina Dubbe and Dr. Leslie Apgar not in the studio, but joining us via remote to the studio. Gina is the managing director and co-founder of Greenhouse Wellness and the co-founder of Lasiva. We met them briefly in our first news segment, but it's good to find a little bit more information. Gina is also an entrepreneur and venture capitalist with a proven track record of growing successful businesses in emerging industries. Dr. Apgar is the co-founder and medical director of Greenhouse Wellness and co-founder of Lasiva, so partners in crime, so to speak. She is a board-certified OBGYN with 20 years of experience in direct patient care. So I love seeing when we get this, this wealth of knowledge and combinations of talents in startup businesses. So we're very excited. But I want to hear a little bit more how two suburban moms and apparently best friends got to talking medical cannabis and then taking it all by storm. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started and what was the trigger point for you?
Leslie and I had been neighbors for, 20 years. And she always has an interesting Eastern-Western medical philosophy. And she came to me one day with an opportunity that a patient of hers had brought to her about potentially her being a medical director at a medical cannabis dispensary. And they also were seeking investment. And so as most mothers and women do, we were doing 2 things at once. We had played tennis, and on our way back, we did a conference call with a gentleman seeking money to bid for a grow processor dispensaries here in Maryland.
Mm-hmm. And let's just say the call didn't go well. He basically mansplained us, just to use a common term. And Gina, at any given time, is, I feel like, the smartest person in the room. And for the really valid question of how do you expect a return on our capital investment, was met with sort of derision and, well, you wouldn't understand the math. And by the way, she's triple boarded or whatever certified in engineering, and she's ridiculously intelligent. So unfortunately, the call didn't go as we had hoped it would. And so I just let it go. I was embarrassed. I was really humiliated. I felt like I'd wasted my best friend's time. So I put it out of my mind, and I kind of skulked back home. And I was not even in the door to my house when the phone rang, and Gina was like, Les, I looked up the requirements online, and I feel like we can just do it. The 2 of us, we'll just bid ourselves. And I was like, have you lost your mind? Like, what do we know about cannabis? What do we know about this? And she's like, no, it's going to be 20 hours of work. We're just going to bid it ourselves.
And it was 120 hours of work and 600 pages later, 10 days. And so we tossed it over the wall. And a year later, found out that we had won. Now, the gentleman with whom we spoke did not. But here we were, the owners of a medical cannabis dispensary with, in my case, no knowledge of cannabis.
Yeah.
And so it's been an interesting ride. But what we have found is it is gratifying. We see, for me, it's a new experience seeing patients. For Dr. Apgar, of course, it's not. But the people that we see are so sick and seeking help.
It's been the most gratifying medicine I've ever practiced. I mean, it's not at all ever where I thought I would be in the world. I never ever thought that I would be such a character in this movie that we're watching on the legalization of cannabis. But it's truly, I mean, I used to deliver babies, and this is more profound than that. I'm watching people get better, and I'm not going to say cure disease, but I'm going to say manage their disease in ways that I've never seen in Western medicine. That doesn't happen. I've not seen people lose a wheelchair or lose a cane and stop a tremor and manage their colitis or their Crohn's disease or their inflammatory bowel disease or their arthritis or their whatever. I mean, I've just never seen these things happen. I've never seen laboratory values normalized. It's absurd. And it isn't, like Gina said, it's incredibly gratifying because the patients will, let's just pretend it was before COVID, come in and hug you and cry with you and just say, you know, you guys have made such a difference. And thank you for like speaking to the women out there. Because when we entered this space, there were no products for women, nothing that was attractive, at least toward women. And so our female patients are coming in and they're buying 10 or 12 or 15 of our Placebo pens and saying, thank you. This is the only thing that works for my migraines. It's the only thing that helps me sleep at night. It saved my marriage. So it's just incredibly gratifying. I just can't say enough about how grateful I am to be a part of it.
I love your energy. How long have you been in business?
We've been in business now 4 years. We're one of the oldest dispensaries in Maryland. We're fortunate we won Cannabis Dispensary of the Year last year for the nation and have had some very gracious and kind honors. But we really cater to the sickest in Maryland. We get most of the terminal patients. And so we have a very medical clientele.
And we set our dispensary up from the get-go to be so different because I'm the physician. I mean, I'm an MD who has ownership in greenhouse with Gina. I mean, that's weird. Like, what doctor has that, and what doctor is willing to give up their steady income from their real doctor career to do something on the fringe like this? Like, my fellow colleagues thought I'd lost my ever-loving mind. And they said, what are you doing? You're throwing your career away. You're going to lose your medical license. And I was like, well, maybe, but Western medicine isn't really curing anybody. And I was part of the problem for so many years, dispensing Percocets for people after a C-section or after a hysterectomy without any thought about what that was doing to people long term. I was never taught to me in medical school or residency, this is what we do. If a patient comes in, you give them 40 Percocets. And now I'm part of the solution. I mean, now we are getting patients off of opioids. So I feel like karmically, it's kind of a good thing that I'm kind of undoing part of the problem that I was affiliated with for so many years. And it's education. So education is everything we do. I train doctors, I train practitioners, nurses, community, patients. And that's how we set our dispensary up, that I would be the attending physician and then I would teach my interns and my residents and my chief residents on down. And so when patients are really sick and they really need medical guidance through cannabis, they seek us out because they know that we're not just some bud tender behind the counter who's going to give them like the highest THC, but is actually going to look at their list of medications, talk to them about their symptoms, their problems, and then try and find effective treatment modalities for them. So it's been incredibly rewarding. And obviously, it's been a fight. It's not been easy. It's a really hard industry to be in.
Well, I love your passion, and we need more doctors like you and Dr. Shaw who understand and aren't just following blindly the whole pill treadmill that so many people are on. So last year was, bad for a lot of businesses. A lot of companies went out of business and are gone forever. How did your business fare during the COVID pandemic?
Sadly, it grew dramatically because what we saw was an uptick in the anxiety, depression, and sleeplessness of many of our patients. Sadly, people were fighting with thoughts of suicide and severe anxiety. So we saw an uptick in our business. We went totally curbside. So no one comes in. And our dispensary is a little different. It is designed so that your mother would feel comfortable. It's got the white leather chairs and the crystal chandeliers, and it is designed as a med spa experience. But we're 100% curbside at the moment so that we can protect our staff and patients.
It's quite evident, as in many industries, that there tends to be a male domination involved, and there are more and more females taking very strong leadership roles. And so in this industry as well, can you kind of describe how you've had to face this type of sexism and how you've overcome it?
Well, from the moment we got the license, it was interesting. My bank called me up and said, I'm inviting you to leave the bank, because they found that we were one of the successful winners of a dispensary. So, that's difficult in itself. And my rejoinder to them was, when you ask a man to leave the bank, we'll leave too. To this day, 4 years later, I'm still in that bank, because it's just a double standard. What we also found when we started out was there was only about 3% in Maryland of the dispensaries had significant female ownership. We were probably the number one. We couldn't get access to product. There was a definite good old boys network, and I would call somebody and go, hey, you got a great price on this. What was your price? How do I get it to? And they said, oh, I bought a certain quantity. So I would call the manufacturer and say, I'll buy that quantity. I want that price. Sorry, we're all out. So there definitely is a double standard with regard to business. Now, I think we've successfully climbed out of that. We pay our bills and we're good citizens. But when you look at cannabis as a whole, it is leaning toward the male side of the population with strains like G-Spot, Poochie Love,
Pootie Tang, AK-47.
Women are going to buy that.
It's not attractive, at least to women. And the experience of what has traditionally been cannabis is not necessarily attractive to many women and a lot of men too. Our average age of patient is something like 62. And so my patients, can you imagine the conversations I have with these people over the phone or by Zoom conference or whatever on how to inhale through a vape or a joint or whatever? It's hysterical. Like these are phrases that I never thought I would hear myself saying. I mean, it's hysterical. But patients, especially women, want discrete medication options. And also I think the industry has just done such a disservice by excluding women from a seat at the table, because women are the first entry of healthcare for the family, and they make the majority of healthcare decisions for the family, for their spouses or their significant others, for their children, and then for themselves. So if you lift women up and you take care of women, you're going to lift all of society up. And I think the whole industry is more refined as a result. I think to include as many voices at the table as possible is only going to strengthen the industry, because we are unwinding those long, tawdry stigmas. And it's really tiresome. We're Sisyphus pushing that boulder uphill every single day. So I think that there's still a lot of opportunities. Gina and I sometimes have good days, and sometimes we have not so good days as far as fighting the stigma and the stereotypes. But we definitely have our eye on the prize. We definitely approach our businesses with gratitude and kindness. And really, that karmic law really does seem to attract. So we're just sort of trying to infect everybody else with our education and with the message behind Placebo, which is to uplift everyone. It's a combination of the word bliss and sativa, and it's a nod to anandamide, obviously, which was the first endocannabinoid discovered. So it was an intentional word because it's an intentional message. And so that's kind of the way we approach it.
Hey, I got a question I got to ask real quick. Working in a bank, were you able to get a bank account and merchant card processing where others have not been able to?
Well, we're fortunate in Maryland. There are one or two banks that handle pretty much all the cannabis industry. And it's basically a closed loop banking system, right? I put my money in, I transfer it to the grower who transfers it to the processor. But in any case, we can bank. It is still difficult. It is still extremely costly. Our banking fees are absolutely ridiculous for the privilege of having a depository, but we choose to do that just for the safety of our staff.
Well, ladies, I thank you for coming on and being on the show, and I wish you the best in business. And again, I just love having a doctor in there really believing in the plant over the pill cycle that so many people are on. So thank you both for being on. We're going to go off for another quick commercial message. And when we come back, we have Dan Betts. So stay tuned.
Coming to you after our hike that we finished. Buster exercises 3 miles. Today is a recovery day because he did 8-mile hike over the weekend, broken up into 2. But what I want to share with you is this company here called Simple Changes. I learned about them and I absolutely love the concept. It's wellness, community, and organization. So as you can see here, I love the wrapping. I love purple, and it comes with 3 products. So I've been trying them out. First, it's the hemp oil spray. Then it's the hemp oil dropper and the hemp oil ball. So I'll be trying all of these out. I've been exploring them, exploring the ingredients. I met with the team on Zoom. Really neat product. And I love the fact that they also want to incorporate healthy practices. So they come with a little journal and something about Simple Success Guide. So, Simple Changes.
Well, welcome back. That was wonderful news to hear from the ladies at Blisiva. I love seeing women taking the world by storm, and obviously the hard work is paying off and they're getting recognized for it. So congrats to that and keep up the wonderful work. Now I'd like to welcome Daniel Betts. He is the founder of Liquidate, as well as an attorney at law, practicing criminal law down in Austin, Texas. So we'll find a little bit more about him. He is a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from the University of Chicago before going to the University of Texas, hook 'em horns, for law school, and currently practices criminal defense in Austin, as I mentioned. He brought this expertise in chemistry and molecular gastronomy together to help develop this liquid D8, which we are finding more and more about. So we're very excited to hear a little bit about what Delta 8 THC is and how it's different than regular THC. We've heard a lot about it, but it's still a pretty murky area, especially in this state. So I look forward to hearing some information.
So I want to tell you all about what the difference is between Delta 8 THC and regular THC. Regular THC, I think it's best to analogize it to things that we know, like Delta 9 THC, regular THC, and CBD. Delta 9 THC acts in the body on the CB1 receptor, and that's generally responsible for psychoactive effects, what we would associate with Delta 9 THC. CBD acts on the CB2 receptor and is non-psychoactive and associated with pain relief, anti-inflammation, things like that. Delta 8 is slightly different chemically than Delta 9. It has just one double bond that's different. And as a result, it ends up acting not on just the CB1, but also the CB2 receptor as well. And so you have less of a psychoactive effect as a result than Delta 9, but more of the effects associated with CBD. So it's kind of an all-arounder. We are really excited about it. We think that for those users who have used Delta 9 for a long time, they may find some benefits to it, to activating that CB2 receptor that they might have otherwise neglected. And so those are the primary functional differences between Delta 8 and regular Delta 9 THC.
So what is the legal status? And I know you're a Texas criminal attorney, so you're probably the most familiar with Texas law, but also share anything you know about Delta 8 and other states.
Sure. So Delta 8 THC, it kind of depends where it's derived from. And the way that it's made generally is from CBD. I'll go over that in a little bit more detail. It's not contained for the most part in general cannabis plants. And assuming that it is made from hemp, from CBD that's made from hemp, then it is federally legal. It's not illegal based on federal law. Individual states have chosen to outlaw it or to designate it as in some way synthetic and covered by their laws. I think there are currently 12 states in the United States that have it currently listed as illegal. And unfortunately, a lot of them overlap with recreational markets. And that may be because Delta 8 currently doesn't have much regulation around it, and they want to be involved in that regulation. But if you're not in one of those 12 states, Texas is not a state where it's illegal. It is legal to own and possess. Texas currently doesn't allow for smokable products to be sold in hemp smokable products. And so while there are means of getting vape pens that contain Delta 8 THC out there on the market, it's a little bit of a legal gray area currently. So things are kind of up in the air, but since the 2018 Farm Bill, derivatives of hemp, of which Delta 8 is one, are legal in the U.S. It's kind of the Wild West. It's pretty exciting.
So I have two questions. One is probably more interesting to some than the other. The first would be, do you believe that Delta 8 is essentially the final nail in the coffin, or alternatively, the point where you can't put the genie back in the box? Because how are they going to step back at this point? Are they going to create additional laws at a federal level, or are they just going to accept the fact that this should go towards legalization federally?
That's a really good question. I think that it is going to go that direction, but it remains to be seen. A lot of people last year were worried in the Delta 8 world about the DEA coming in and saying, that the Farm Bill wasn't allowing for quote unquote synthetically derived cannabinoids, even though the Farm Bill specifically said that derivatives, of which this is a derivative, are allowed. And I think people were worried. Congress recently just sent a letter to the DEA that said, no, we really meant it when we said that, as long as it's not Delta 9 THC, if it comes from the hemp plant, it's allowable. And I think that, for a lot of reasons, I think for some people, unfortunately, who have not used cannabis before, cannabis can be scary. They hear about people trying an edible and having too much, and that being a concern. I think that Delta 8 is this entry point for all these people who have never used cannabis products before, so that they can see that it's not scary, that it isn't something that we need to be worried about. And for that ever smaller minority of Americans who do believe that it should be still illegal, I think that this is a way to get to them and show them. So to answer your question, yeah, I do think that this is the beginning of the end.
And then to follow up with the second question for our audience, can you describe kind of in layman's terms how the Delta 8 is synthesized?
Sure. So yeah, I'll try to do it as much in layman's terms as I can. I have never synthesized Delta 8 myself, but my understanding is that it is synthesized from CBD using a bentonite clay catalyst. So CBD, Delta 8 THC, and Delta 9 THC all have the same molecular weight and all the same number of carbons, hydrogens, and oxygens. And so all that remains is necessary is to move things around in the molecule to create one from the other. And so CBD, of which there's plenty out there, is interconverted into D8 and actually gets converted through Delta 9. And as a result, when that happens, there is a small portion of Delta 9 that remains in the Delta 8, and the chemists are getting better and better about having it be more of a concentration of Delta 8 than Delta 9. But that's one of the other reasons that it's kind of a hazy legal area is if you get that distillate, it does have Delta 9 in it and higher than the 0.3% concentration. So in order to get it to a legal level, it's got to be brought down and deconcentrated under the current legal regime.
Well, I have a final question as well. You mentioned that it is not legal to smoke or inhale the Delta 8 in Texas. So, and considering that you are involved with Liquidate, I'm thinking there might be an answer here, but what is the best way to consume Delta 8 then?
So in Texas currently, you're not allowed to sell hemp products for smoking, so it is a little bit of a legal gray area. What we like is this product that we've developed called Liquidate, which is actually a water-based, which sounds crazy because normally we think of cannabinoids as oil, but it's a water-based product that allows as a beverage additive to any beverage. And so one of the benefits of this is it's a nano emulsion that breaks the particle size down to below the nanometer level. And that allows it to be bioavailable very quickly. So on the order of not what we think of as an edible 1 to 2 hours, but on the order of 5 to 10 minutes, closer to a beer or something. So we think that this product is the new killer app, and it's going to be when we get it in, shots, seltzers, things like that. It's going to be a real way to get to the public and to compete with beer and coffee drinks, all things like that.
And is that currently available?
Is it available now?
So right now we're seeking partners. We have the product. We are marketing it locally to juice shops and things like that. But we're currently seeking a larger partner. So we're kind of in the development stage.
Let's talk offline. I'm interested in talking more about that.
I'd love to.
Gina and Leslie, how do y'all deal with Delta 8 at all there in Maryland, or what's its status in Maryland?
Yeah, I mean, having the dispensary means that we get any part of the cannabis plant, and Delta 8 has always been a favorite. And funny enough, during COVID, we had a ton of Delta 8 specifically made products coming through, and they're such crowd pleasers because Delta 8 is a much softer and shorter lived sensation, and it also is a little bit of a somnolent, so it's great for people who are having a hard time sleeping. But most of our patients, I mean the vast majority of our patients, do not want to be impaired. They are not coming for a recreational experience as the first reason that they're here. Yes, they may also want something for a Friday night or whatever, but they don't want to be impaired. And so Delta 8 is a really fantastic product that give the patient the sensation that they're looking for. But just because it's my job to educate, this stuff works much, much better when CBD is added. So it's like we say, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Mother Nature knows what she's doing with this plant. And so the more terpenes and flavonoids and major cannabinoids and minor cannabinoids that we add together, the better the effect. And we find that Delta 8 works really well in these higher concentrations. But we also find that just a little bit of Delta 8 added to other things also goes a long way. So it's definitely something we're seeing. I think there's a lot of positive buzz about Delta 8, and I'm excited for this drink to come out, because that is one of the problems, is the bioavailability of these medications taken orally. It's really hard to get the serum levels to where they're therapeutic. So if we can get things into the bloodstream very quickly, that's going to be a big boon. And I would take a seltzer or a shot or whatever. So
it also fixes the problem of people starting with an edible and then not feeling anything and taking a second edible,
right,
and then being over the top.
Right. Right. Yeah. I love that.
Dan, before we let you go, can you update us on anything you might know about legislative pushes in Texas or on the federal level?
So for a minute there, I was concerned. There was a bill in the Texas legislature that looked like it was going to try to target Delta 8 and characterize it as just THC generally. The legislative session wraps up in Texas on May 30th. And from what I've heard from talking to legislators, this bill isn't going to make it far. So we'll see. We'll see in a couple weeks if I'm right. But I don't expect the legal status of Delta 8 to change in Texas in the next 2 years, would be my guess, until the next legislative session at the very least.
Any chance of just getting recreational cannabis in Texas?
I'm remembering back, I think it was 2014, I was having a conversation with a judge, a criminal judge, and she was saying, when do you think it's going to happen? And I said, it's got to be by 2019. And I can't believe that we're here and that it hasn't happened. It might require Greg Abbott leaving, the governor, but I like to think that he and other Republicans are starting to come around on this and not see it as a political issue.
I think it's the lieutenant governor, personally.
Yeah, Chris Perry's position always was that it was Dan Patrick that was the problem, not Abbott. Do you have an opinion on that?
I don't. I'd always heard it was the other way around, but I trust Chris Perry to be closer to that issue, so I'll defer to him.
Okay. Well, Dan, I certainly appreciate you to be on. Ladies, certainly appreciate you guys to be on. You can check our website to contact any of our guests today or any other time at buddingreport.com. Any of our guests would love to hear from you, especially in that we're still not having meetings together where we can all get together, although I hear later on in the year that's changing and there will be some trade shows that are live. I'm looking forward to that. Join us next week when our guests are Nathaniel Gurian and Justin Fisher. And we look forward to having you on that show as well. Thank you very much for coming on today, and have a fantastic week.